Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Halifax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-449 would allow the Minister to set up a trust fund, as you know, for other levels of government so that seniors can take public transit for free of charge during off-peak hours. And I think this is a laudable goal, Mr. Speaker, since anything that encourages people to take public transit more frequently is a great idea. It's a more active form of transportation, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and it keeps our communities vibrant. But this bill is such a tease, Mr. Speaker. It's a tease because we could be talking about a bill that completely reimagines public transit in this country. Mr. Speaker, our current approach to public transportation to transportation is unsustainable, and we need to make a transition to a more sustainable form of transport, including public transportation. Improving transit is about setting a legacy, both economic and environmental. We need better, more efficient public transport because it improves access to community services and it improves participation in the community. And poor access to transport causes isolation for individuals and for pockets of our communities, particularly in low-income areas of our communities as well as rural communities. Improving public transportation is an excellent way to combat poverty because it allows the economic engagement in all areas of the city by people who live in all areas. It improves the exchange of money and ideas, and it allows people to access educational opportunities and services that are outside of their neighborhoods. It provides individuals and families with the opportunity to escape the cycle of poverty. And free transit will greatly increase the quality of life by removing the terrible choice between rent and bus tickets or food and heat. Canada is the only G8 country that does not fund public transit, and it has negative consequences on the environment and on our pocketbooks. And Canada doesn't have a national transit strategy either. Seniors, as you know, are some of our most vulnerable citizens, both economically and socially, and better transport for seniors is an important issue to tackle, particularly with respect to increasing a person's ability to live independently. As seniors age, some can no longer drive, and as their mobility is limited, they may become more isolated if they can't afford public transit or if they don't have access to public transit. Mr. Speaker, there is a public transit route in Halifax called the Manors, and recently it was announced that it would be cancelled by the Halifax Regional Municipality. The Manors went to all of the seniors' manors on the peninsula. It was a bit of a circuitous route, and it might not have made much sense to me. I didn't take the Manors, I take the number 7. But this, it didn't make sense for getting from point A to point B for me, but it made a lot of sense to the community that it served, which was a community of seniors around the city. So it allowed seniors at Joe Howe Manor or at Samuel Prince Manor, they could get on the number 3 and they could get where they needed to go, the grocery store, or their doctor's office, the bank, or the shopping mall. And when the announcement to cancel the Manors route was made, they said that the bus's route didn't pay for itself and it had to be canceled. Well, seniors from Samuel Prince Manor, they rallied to fight that decision. They got together with other residents of the other manors, and after many petitions and phone calls and letters, they actually realized their victory. They had worked together to mobilize their community, and they saved this vital service. It was an incredible victory for our community, Mr. Speaker, but you may think to yourself, well, that's a municipal issue. Why would it be relevant for an MP to raise this in the House of Commons? Well, Mr. Speaker, I believe that there is a federal role for transit. I believe that there is a necessary federal leadership role for transit. It's too important a service not to have a national strategy. And in fact, it's not just a service, it's a necessity. And I'm proud that my colleague, the member for Trinity Spadina, introduced just such a bill recently. She introduced the National Public Transit Strategy Act, and it would coordinate between all levels of government to maintain and expand public transit across the country. The Public Transit Act, a first of its kind, would decrease the burden on cities and communities. And what the bill does is it outlines a strategy for the federal government to provide a permanent investment plan to support public transit, to establish federal funding mechanisms for public transit, to work together with all levels of government to provide sustainable, predictable, long-term and adequate funding, and it would work to establish accountability measures to ensure that all governments work together to increase access to public transit. Better public transit means sustainable economic growth and cleaner, more productive cities. It means a better Canada, and it does mean a better Halifax. And this story of the Manors, Mr. Speaker, is a story from a city. But we do have rural examples in the riding as well, because when I speak of Halifax in this chamber, I'm speaking of the riding of Halifax. The name of the riding can sometimes be misleading because I don't actually represent the entire city, and I don't represent only the city. I represent the peninsula, so the South End, Downtown, North End, West End, and Westmount. But the riding extends beyond the Armdale Rotary, and it includes Fairview, Jollymore, Purcell's Cove, Duncan's Cove, Ketch Harbour, Sambro, Harrietsfield, and Williamswood. So it's much bigger and much more diverse than people think, Mr. Speaker. And when I first rose in this House to give my inaugural speech in 2008 after my election, I talked about some of these communities which are located in what is affectionately known as the Loop, because the highway goes around in a loop. And that the members of these communities, many members of these communities, didn't have access to bus service at all. When I first rose to speak in this House, you could not catch a bus in Sambro. You could not get on a bus to go to the grocery store or to get onto the peninsula or to go see your doctor or go see your friends. But then a pilot project was announced. And we had a bus route, then it was reduced, and right now it's at a reduced service. There's no service during peak hours. And another thing to point out about these communities, Mr. Speaker, is if you live in Harrietsfield or Williamswood, you have to go grocery shopping in Spryfield. You have to get to another community to even access a grocery store. And it's absolutely necessary, it's absolutely vital that we have public transit in all our communities across Canada, as well as across the riding of Halifax. And as a result, there's been a great community coming together to try and have an increased bus service and increased public transit present in these communities. There's actually a blog called the Sambro Loop Community Bus blog, and you can go on and give information about what's going on, and you can figure out how to mobilize about bus service. There's a Facebook group, and even checking out the Facebook group today, Mr. Speaker, people were posting car share. They were posting, being able to get a ride with somebody else. They were posting pictures of bus stops that have poles but no sign. And they were talking about how they could rely on each other to maybe get into town or get to the grocery store. And while it's wonderful that this community has come together and is organizing ride share programs, they need a bus system. And so why is there no service? There's no service because the HRM doesn't have the money to provide this kind of service, or they're choosing not to find the money to provide this kind of service. So how can we help these communities from a federal level, Mr. Speaker? Well, we have a solution. The NDP has a solution, and it's dealing with the federal gas tax transfer. So the gas tax transfer to the municipality was established, but it was established with very, very few strings attached. So strings attached with respect to its use. And so the intention was for improvements to public transit. And while many cities have used this transfer for its intended purposes, by making service enhancements to their public transportation systems, there are a number of cities that have not. And it shows what one of the problems is with not having strings attached with respect to use. And the federal government can give municipalities stable, long-term funding by transferring an extra cent of the gas tax, but making sure that it is dedicated to public transit. So this is our solution, Mr. Speaker, and it's a solution that makes sense to me when I look at my own community and realize that not everybody in my community can even access a public transportation system. And you think about how can we change that at a federal level? This is where good policy, public policy comes from. Good public policy comes from the ideas coming from community. And we bring them here to Ottawa, and we bring them to this chamber, and we say, here is a solution that would help my community. Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I think I am out of time, and I appreciate the time to speak to this bill.
Resuming debate.